نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. And welcome to lesson 10 in Aqida Al Tahawiyya. Last session we talked in great detail about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His essence, His being, or as we refer to it as this divine unity that exists. We're just going to finish that off today, inshallah. Before next week we move on to His eternal and everlasting names and attributes, asma wa sifat. So really our focus has been on what we term as the zat of Allah, the being of Allah. And even though we restrained our descriptions by the lack of our mental and intellectual capacity to be able to do so, we established that anything associated with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He Himself needs to describe, or the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam needs to describe. And also we can then understand from those, and we need to approach this in a holistic way. So if we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not X, but Y can be interpreted in an understanding of X or in an understanding of Z, then we should take the understanding of Z. It is not piecemeal. We don't just take one piece of evidence and establish our understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on that one single piece of evidence. What we do is we gather all the evidence holistically and then assess how we understand Allah. So, does Allah live? We've already established His eternity. So in essence, we should know that basically Allah lives for eternity. So He must be alive. And that's exactly what we're going to go into now. وَهُوَ حَيٌّ. He is alive. Okay. La yamut. And so again, we've got to try to understand these terms as best as possible, even with our limitations. So what does live mean? Live, when we normally say, is that the individual has the capacity to do as they choose. If I was dead, then I would just be sat in this sofa. I would not be able to move. I would not be able to think. I would not be able to do. I would be literally just a piece of wood. I would be of no use whatsoever to anything or anybody. I could not do anything. In fact, eventually, obviously, due to the fact that I've died, my body will start to smell. It will start to decompose, as we talked about last session. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is living, and He is eternal living. So He associates living to Himself. And then by default, He disassociates that death from Him. He does not die. And in reality, that goes without saying from how we've described Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala previously. Clearly we know that He is ever living. We know that. Clearly we know that He does not die, because from the way we've described Him previously, in that He did not have a beginning. In order to avoid infinite regression, we would have to eventually accept that there is one being that was not created by any other being. We would have to accept that, and that obviously we have as Allah, that is the creator. And we also know that this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have an end. He is perpetual, He is infinite, and therefore we've already, as I said, established that He is hayyun, He is alive, and He does not die. So when a being is alive and it does not die, then we need to know is how does He sustain Himself. We know that we sustain ourselves through the consumption of food, through the consumption of drink, through rest. These are three things we cannot survive. How many days can we go without sleeping? Maybe 3-4 days maximum, and then it can kill us. How many days can we go without food? Maybe a week, maybe longer. Eventually we'd die. How many days can we go without water? Probably 2-3 days, and we'd die with lack of water. So we know we need to be sustained by these three things. And as a creature, we have to also procreate. We have to have children. We have to keep replacing the dead with new, because we do die. So these are our limitations. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is qayyum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Himself as qayyum. Qayyum mean that not only is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala self-sufficient, self-subsistence, but also he sustains all. So he sustains all creatures. There's no limit to, and I gave some descriptors rather, in the previous recording. I'm kicking the stand again, my apologies. Sorry about that. You sometimes forget where you are, don't you? So not only does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be sustained himself, he also sustains all the world around him. So that shows clearly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need for his affairs to be managed. He has no need to consume food or water. He has no need to rest or anything of that nature. But not only does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not have that need, he on the other hand provides that for all around him. You know, we see so many birds flying around. We see so many insects around. We see so many flies. We see so many other creatures all over the world around us. And yet, you know, you don't see dead animals on the street died of hunger. It's very rare. I'm not saying animals don't die of hunger. Most likely some will do. But, you know, when you're talking about here in the UK, for example, there's hardly any creature that goes without food at the end of the day. You know, we have fridges and freezers and cupboards and all the rest of it to sustain ourselves. But a bird that wakes up in the morning, excuse me, bird that wakes up in the morning doesn't know where this food's going to come from. But every single bird in that nest goes to sleep with a full belly at the end of the night, okay, or end of the day even. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains, he says, Qayyum la yanam. He is self-sustaining and he is self-sufficient and he sustains and provides for others, and also he does not sleep. La yanam. Khaliqun bila haja. He creates without a need. And this is an important section that we need to focus on, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates without a need. When I gave an example of how, no matter how many times I try to avoid it, I keep kicking it. When I gave the example of a human creating this in the last session, then we said that, you know, that how can this leaf understand me? But humans had a need to create this. Humans had a need. Why? Because we need a fancy bookmark to put in our book. And how would we do that without this? Similarly, you know, I'm using this little device that's switching on the recording and switching it off. So I don't have to lean over and press record, and then the first thing that you see is my big fingers coming back from the screen after I've just pressed the on button. So, you know, we invented one of these, so it Bluetooths with the phone. So we needed Bluetooth, so we designed Bluetooth. And then we needed a cup, so we designed a cup or a mug. Yep, it's the half Herdine cup. Yep, of course. What else would it be? And then we had a need for warm drinks, hot drinks. Okay, I know it's not warm or hot because this has been here for half an hour already. Then we need a need for a drink that we would enjoy. So every time humans create something, there is a need. Similarly, anytime any creature creates something, there's a need. When beavers make dams, they have a need. When birds make nests, they have a need. When bees make hives, they have a need. Every creature that makes something has a need. It would not make it any otherwise. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want us, similarly, Imam Tahawi does not want us to have a wrong understanding of Allah, which goes back to the Mujassima, which goes back to the Mushabbiha, in which we try to associate our traits and qualities and needs onto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again he says, Khaliqun bila haja. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates without any need. And this can extend further when it comes to acts of worship. When we say we're praying for Allah, we're praying to Allah. We are praying for ourselves. We are praying to Allah, but for ourselves. We have the need. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need for our worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need for our fasts or even our qurbani or anything that we do. He has no need. We are the ones that have the need. So this is emphasized. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is razikun bila mu'na. He is the one who provides all forms of sustenance, even it be oxygen that we breathe, because that's also some form of sustenance. It keeps us alive. You can have all the food and drink in the world, but if you've got no oxygen, you're stuck. And also bila mu'na. without any difficulty, because I've given you some examples of how creatures live in the world and how they have to go through some pain. You know, a bird's going around looking for some worms, it's flying around, picks them up, but then before that, he needs to make sure that it's got a nest that's safe, away from preying animals that might catch or break the eggs, or if the eggs have hatched, the chicks in there. So, you know, it's always worrying and panic, you know, thinking, well, you know, to the capacity that a bird can think and all the rest of it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides without any mu'na, no difficulty, no pain, no effort, no expending of resources, no energy. You know, it's all without any hardship, any difficulty whatsoever, because of his omnipotence, his absolute power, his absolute capability. Mumitun bila makhafa. He brings death without any fear, without any fear of that death, of bringing that about. So that's pretty straightforward. Ba'ithun bila mashaqqa. And similarly, he resurrects without any difficulty. So we would think that, you know, bringing an end to something may be difficult, but it's not. Many times when we want to bring an end to things, it can be difficult, whether it's coming to the end at work, whether it's coming to end in relationships, whether it comes to end in, you know, where we've lived all our lives. You know, this brings always some kind of difficulty or fear. There's no case of that. And this resurrection will occur. Many people say, how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrect? You know, what if I've been eaten by a lion? What if I've drowned at sea? What if I got chopped up in a mincer? And, you know, or what if I was burnt and ashes were spread everywhere? How is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to bring me together? How is he going to resurrect me? Now, how does resurrection work? You know, what is this thing called resurrection? You know, surely that suggests that we come back to life. And how is that possible? You know, we've never seen anybody that's come back to life. You know, isn't that a bit ghost-like, or isn't that a little bit kind of like coming back from the dead? And what's the purpose of this second life if we accept that? So, you know, resurrection and life after death is one of the most difficult concepts for humans to get their mind around, yet they've seen examples of it all around them. Their own life is an example of it, but unfortunately we don't take heed from there. Anyway, that's where I want to get us today, and I am happy we've got there. Next session we're going to start looking at the Asma'ullah and his Sifat. So we've now hopefully got a good understanding of, in terms of the Dhat, the being of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what we can and can't say, and we should have a firm understanding about that. And inshallah, as we progress over the next several sessions, we will also try to bring that kind of understanding with regards to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan for joining me again, and join me again next week inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.